I'm Nick Armstrong, and you're watching Dear Fort Collins, a podcast featuring the people that make Fort Collins a wonderful place to live. This series of episodes is all about the election that's happening in November 2025. And we're interviewing all of the different candidates for mayor, city council, and PSD school board. And we want to hear from them in their own words about why they're running, what they care about, and you then can be more informed about who you're voting for when it's time to fill out your ballot. With ranked choice voting, it's really difficult to know sometimes who your candidates are and what order you're going to rank them in. So I hope these series of episodes really help you figure out which candidates best align with your interests and needs. And as we do these interviews, I want you to know that I have given the candidates access to the questions in advance. I try to ask all of the candidates the same questions, or at least give them an opportunity to answer the same questions in the same kind of way. And there's very minimal editing on any of these episodes. So unless there was an errant sneeze or a cat jumping on someone's lap, you're hearing from the candidates in their own words. I do have a quick disclaimer to give you that I serve on the Parks and Recreation Board for the city of Fort Collins, and my opinions on this show are my own. They're not the position of the board or of the city. And I have also advised a number of the candidates about their campaigns, and in some cases have either helped with their campaigns or made a donation here or there. I do my absolute best to make sure that they all get fair treatment, that there aren't any favorites being played, and that also we're asking them the same types of questions and they have an opportunity to answer those in kind. I hope that you enjoy these episodes and that they help you become a more informed voter in the upcoming election. And if you do have any questions, concerns, or comments, please let me know and reach out on the Dear Fort Collins website. I'm always happy to hear from you. And some of the questions that you'll hear me ask of the candidates have been submitted by listeners and watchers just like you. Folks who are fans of the show and want to know more about particular candidates and their positions on particular things. So with that, let's get on with the show. This episode, we have Emily Francis, who is running for mayor in the city of Fort Collins. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Tell us about your campaign. Why'd you decide to run?
Oh, it's a great question. And one, as you can imagine, I get asked a lot. So I've been serving on city council since 2019. When I was first elected, and I was reelected in 2023. So I've been serving on city council representing District 6 for 4 years, and as mayor pro tem, which is a fancy way of saying vice mayor, for the past 4 years. I was unanimously elected by my city council peers 2 times. And so for me, serving as mayor is the next step in being able to give back to my community and give back to Fort Collins. So I'm excited for the opportunity, and I'm excited for folks to learn more about me and have this conversation with you.
So we've seen your expertise as a council member for District 6 in particular. What expertise do you hope to bring to the table, or where do you hope to elevate your experience into the role of mayor?
Yeah, so, I'm from Fort Collins. I was born and raised here, and a byproduct of PSD, going to Laurel, Lesher, and Collins. There's actually 3 of us who went to Fort Collins High School that are running for mayor. So a good outcome of PSD, and also graduating from CSU with a bachelor's in natural resources. And so, growing up here and then dedicating my education and career to giving back to Fort Collins, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to serve the whole city. And I think that my time on council, I've really brought a lens of affordability and housing, and really talking holistically about how Fort Collins is going to move into the future. We have a lot of issues that we've been talking about, and we've made progress on things like housing and transit and climate and neighborhood investment, but we still have a long ways to go, and I'm excited to help lead Fort Collins through that next chapter.
You mentioned a lot of different ideas there. What can you share as a specific project or an issue that you'd like to tackle first if elected to mayor?
Yeah, well, I think that, housing has been the number one issue in Fort Collins for multiple years. I originally, it wasn't new, but it wasn't being elevated at city council the way that residents felt like it should. And we still have a lot of work to do on housing. We just did our community survey, and housing was still the number one issue, right? So city council being more responsive to our housing needs and the impact that has. I think everyone is feeling affordability and the impacts of affordability, not just from housing now, but from multiple areas of their lives. And so I think it's really prudent for city council to think about, how is that impacting residents? How is that impacting the city? How is it impacting who's living here? and how our city runs. And a other part of that is the second most important topic that people felt through that community service survey was economic opportunity, right? And so when we talk about affordability, housing was number two, and the jobs to be able to afford to live here, housing was number one, jobs to live here was number two. And, that really set for me like a clear direction of what we need to talk about. Our city hasn't experienced growth in population for the past 2 years, but we have seen a shift in who's living here towards older residents, which is great. We're having new people come to Fort Collins. However, we still need people to work and serve coffee and cut our grass and work for the city. And more people are commuting into our community, which isn't helping us achieve our climate goals. And it just doesn't foster a good sense of community when the people who are working here don't live here.
I know that this is a big, complex issue, so we're going to try and unpack it one bit at a time.
Great.
What do you see the city's role as in meaningfully improving the affordable housing situation in Fort Collins?
Yeah, it's a difficult topic because cities have a very limited role in how you can affect affordability, but it's still an important one to tackle. And the way I usually talk about it is, when we talk about affordability, it's an issue across the entire country and also across now the entire world. And so we're not the only ones struggling with this. And what we can control here locally, I talk about, is that right now we're on a trajectory of just increasing prices with housing. And we're not going to bend the curve to go like this, right? But what we can do is instead of like this, we can bend it slightly. And that's really what we're trying to do. And so I think there are some things that the city does have control over. One of those is the development review process and how long it takes a development to get through. That time can add exorbitant costs. When you talk about going from a project that could be approved within a year, that's taking 3, 5, 10 years, that's just adding cost and cost and cost to housing. And so making sure the city is being a good partner and making sure that we're being predictable and we're being partners to bringing what Fort Collins wants to see built here. And then I think the other thing is that if we want to get to our goal of 10% affordable housing in our community, that's a $40 million a year gap in funding that we have. So we can rearrange our budget. We could do that, or we may need to talk about having a dedicated revenue to housing. And so that is also something that I think our city can talk about. We had a ballot initiative for property tax that failed a few years ago for affordable housing. I don't think that means we give up. I think we go back to the community and see what we want to prioritize and what people think the best way to solve that is. And maybe that's a revisit of that conversation as well.
So I'm curious, I also heard you mention jobs as the number 2 priority on the community survey. Do you see that wages, inequality, or other things like that are leading this $40 million shortfall?
Do you mean the $40 million short, like because we don't have enough tax revenue, or because?
To be clear, you mentioned there was a $40 million shortfall in affordable housing funding to get us to an affordable standard of some sort. So my question to you is, do you see that the city also has a role in economic health and development, where you mentioned that the jobs is the secondary most important characteristic on the community survey? How do you feel that those two things are interacting?
So I think they're interacting in a way when we talk about the $40 million a year shortfall, that's like deed restricted housing based on income. When we talk about economic opportunity and the ability to pay for housing, that's more of like the middle housing that we talk about, where you're making more than to qualify for something deed restricted, but you can't afford what's available right now, right? So we have a ton of people living in that space where they make too much to qualify, but they don't make enough to live here. And that's, I think, where we really need to focus on job recruitment and retention. And, talking with students at CSU, a lot of them leave because they don't have a job available for them. There are no jobs. And so a lot of them are going to Denver instead of staying in Fort Collins. And when you think about the amount of resources we as a community and a city put into college students being here, and then that brain drain of them leaving, that's also not good for our city. We want to retain that, and we want to retain what we're putting in and have that education and that care for our community stay in Fort Collins. And so really focusing on how are we attracting and creating more jobs for folks in Fort Collins. Myself, I work for the state of Colorado and I work remotely. For me to find a job in Fort Collins, for me to live here is difficult. I feel it too. My partner feels it too. It is not easy as we are becoming an older community. And so we have this really big disparity of college and retired, and really difficult for families or people early and mid-career to stay in Fort Collins.
Talk to me about what the city's role in that economic development effort looks like from your lens as a mayoral candidate.
Yeah, I think, traditionally, Fort Collins has really relied, and it's really worked out for us on just being a great city, and it attracted companies to want to locate in here. So we think about uh, our HP, or we think about Woodward, we think about Broadcom, some of these larger employers that we have here. They came to Fort Collins because they wanted to be in Fort Collins. But now we just see economic uncertainties and a bunch of different things shaping how employers are choosing where to locate. One of those is the cost, right? And so it might be too expensive or too difficult to open a business in Fort Collins, which I've heard a lot about, just like the difficulties in opening your doors as a business here. That is something the city can definitely facilitate. And again, back to that development review for housing, it is the same for a business. What barriers are we creating and making it so difficult for a company to be here, especially companies that really align with our values? One of our city council priorities for the past 2 years was really looking at how are we attracting more of like a green technology and climate-based companies to open in Fort Collins. And so the city traditionally hasn't invested in that kind of attraction or encouragement. And so maybe it is time to relook at that philosophy. I don't know the answer on that. But I do think we have to start thinking about it, which we've been fortunate to not have to really put a lot of time and investment. And I think that's shifting for Fort Collins. And I think we are going to need to spend some time on how are we attracting businesses that will provide these employment opportunities for folks who want to stay in Fort Collins and don't have that opportunity.
On that same track of growth, knowing that the city has sustainability and climate action goals as well, how do we balance the need for growth along with responsible use of our resources like water and our land that we have available?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, it's one of those things where growth feels inevitable and you can grow smartly, right? It's not good economically to just flatline growth. When you think about sales tax and how your city operates, we need people to move here and we need economic activity to have a city. And so we're going to grow. And the question is, do we want to grow smartly and do we want to grow planned, or do we want to just grow and see what happens? I personally think it's better to take a more proactive approach to really facilitate what kinds of development do we want to see, what kind of businesses do we want to see come here, so that we're building a Fort Collins that really reflects the values and the people of Fort Collins. That to me seems like a better plan than just pretending we're not going to grow and then see what happens, right? We can grow in a way that reflects where we want to see ourselves in the future. And I think that's what we have to do that, right?
So looking at plans that the city has made. The Urban Forest Strategic Plan, looking at things like the Strategic Trails Plan. We know that there are, and in the past, historically, has been an approach that development pays its own way, and that there are affordability impacts to things like trails not being connected and other things like that. So as we look at growth, I'm curious if your policy is a shift away from some of the existing modalities of that development has to pay its own way, and then 10 years later you suddenly have a trail and a park and other things like that? Or is it more we do both and we seek other methods of funding for facilitating some of those things that do make life in Fort Collins more affordable and sustainable, like alternative modes of transit?
Yeah, I think it's a both and, where development's still paying its own way and the impact it's having. But we really need to look at what are we asking development to pay for? And does it make sense? And is it at the right level and the right service? So this has been something that I have really pushed on council over these past 2 years of reevaluating our capital expansion or our impact fees. Impact fees go to parks, they go to police and fire and our general city services, which is great, and we need that funding. However, are those the right levels of service? Are they funding what we think they're funding? Or are we just adding more and more cost and making it more and more difficult to see what we want built in Fort Collins? And then therefore we're never getting what we want. We're getting developments that we don't want, right? So I think it is a balance. And we've stuck with that kind of impact fee calculation and approach since it was originally created. And we haven't revisited that. We're a different city now, and we need to rethink about, is this the best way to approach impact fees and capital expansion fees?
Do you see that as Fort Collins' biggest infrastructure challenge?
Do you mean like the capital expansion fees funding
Yeah, see, it's that those things are
infrastructure?
not maybe funding things in the way that they should be, or that they're maybe being, put into things that are more future forward, but not necessarily impactful today.
So impact fees are based on if you took all of the assets in Fort Collins and divided it by the current population, that is the impact that we say each new resident brings. Well, when you think about it, is the replacement in today's dollars the right metric for that? And it pays for future infrastructure. So it pays for future neighborhood parks, and it is our sole source of funding for neighborhood parks and community parks, which are very important. But as a city, we also have to think about, are we building parks to the right standard? And, we've really thought about this because we passed a tax in 2025 paying for the maintenance of those parks because we got into a position where the city did not have enough funding to maintain those parks. So we want to build neighborhood and community parks, but we also need to build them in a manner in which we can afford to maintain them. And right. And we don't want to build outside of our area, outside of our means. And I think that's what we were going toward. I think we were building outside of our means for what a community park should deliver. And we need to really rethink what is our promise to residents when we build a neighborhood or community park, and then being able to maintain that over the long run.
Maybe I'm connecting dots that you're not intending to, but what I'm hearing is Fort Collins is a choice city where we're trying to attract particular employers, that we also have to address affordability as a measure in order to get the folks who actually work, live, and play here to be able to afford to live here. And then to do that, we also have to have the other measures of affordability so they don't have to always commute with a car or have two cars in a household in order to get people back and forth to work and school and all the other things. So I was curious if the mechanism for the impact fees, as you've outlaid, is the root cause of all of these sort of infrastructure, the waterfall effect of these infrastructure issues. And if so, if that seems like a low-hanging fruit opportunity for us to address these wider systemic issues as a city.
I wish that impact fees were the one single silver bullet solution to this problem, but they're not. They make up a very small percentage of an overall cost to develop something, but they are important because it is one lever that the city can pull, right? And really rethink about how we're doing things. If we look at the ecosystem of how things are created here in Fort Collins, there are multiple processes, and some of those include the city and some of them don't, that impact what kind of houses are being built, what kind of businesses are locating here, who can navigate that process. Can my neighbor who wants to open a restaurant navigate a complex redevelopment process? It's really difficult. Can a national corporation come in and do it? 100%, right? So we have those processes. We had them for a reason. We need to evaluate, is that still serving us? Or are we just getting development that we don't want to see? And so it's that ecosystem that at the city, can we control that? And can we change it? In my mind, that's changing it to being more of a partner. How do we partner with people that we are bringing in things that Fort Collins wants to see instead of being a barrier to things that we do want to see?
Shifting gears slightly, what role do you see the city playing in supporting the arts, and in particular programs and organizations that aren't a part of the official city initiatives like Fort Fund?
Mm-hmm. So I think that this has been a great question that's been brought up a lot, and we are really fortunate to what I consider to have a new cultural services director. She is not that new anymore, but really talking about this question about what does Fort Collins want to see in their arts and culture space. And I think we have a lot of opportunity to grow this. I think one of the things that I hear from folks is that they really want opportunities to do things in Fort Collins that don't necessarily involve drinking and aren't family oriented, right? And so if you go back to like the economic opportunity, that same cohort that is having difficulty finding jobs here are also having difficulty finding community and like things to do, right? And Fort Collins has like a real area of opportunity to step into the space. One program that I read about that I really like to see is it's called a nighttime economy grants, where you're giving grants to arts and culture people and organizations who put on events that don't involve drinking and they're in the night at nighttime. So it's like a nighttime economy to boost the nighttime economy and provide alternative events for people to go to and build a community. One of the things that I saw was like somebody hosted a collage making class. And so you go and you learn how to make collage. It's just like different and unique and a different way to support than going through like the whole Fort Fund grants or the art and public place grants. Like we have a lot of opportunities to do small yet impactful things. And I also think back to when we were doing during COVID and we had the ARPA dollars and we did that work to live for artists and providing subsidies for folks who were in the arts community during that time. That was awesome. That was like a great way to give back to the culture, arts and culture. And we need to continue to creatively think about how we're going to fund these without like really big initiatives or really big complicated grant programs.
Knowing that there's a budget shortfall, a lot of these things fall on small businesses to sort of fund and perpetuate through sales tax or tourism dollars, other things like that. Do you see other levers of funding that the city could implement in this space?
Well, I think one thing is, again, going back to like, how does the city become a facilitator? So, one of the things that I've heard is it's really hard just to find space. Like, it's hard to find space to host things, to have things. The city has a ton of facilities, not only just like our regular city buildings, but we own a lot of property. And how do we better make that space available to community? I think that's like a really easy, low cost barrier, thing to help facilitate that doesn't cost additional sales tax and it's not asking for additional things in the budget. I think that's a low hanging fruit that we could do.
It was the lead organizer of Fort Collins Comic Con. You've seen we pack everybody into the
Yeah.
senior center as we possibly can. Before that, we were packing folks into the Azatlan Center, and the next biggest venue is the Ranch in Loveland, and
Exactly.
you can't do that if you want to participate in Fort Fund. So
Yep.
it's really rate limiting to the things that we are able to do in terms of event organization in the city.
Hmm.
I'm hopeful for spaces like the mall to become a place for convening, and hopefully in the future we have access to additional spaces like you have mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, Shifting gears again slightly, can you explain your understanding of the needs of the LGBTQIA plus residents and visitors in our community, and any actions or where you see the city's role in ensuring the safety and inclusion of that community?
Yeah, that's a good question. And from what I've heard working with this community is that there is a real nervousness and questioning of the city's commitment to our equity office, to continuing the initiatives that we've done. We've recently had a lot of emails asking us not to remove the rainbow crosswalk. We've never had plans to remove the rainbow crosswalk, but just you see it in one community and you're afraid it's going to happen here. And so my approach is that confirming and like reconfirming our commitment to we're not getting rid of our equity, inclusion, and diversity office. We're going to keep that. We're going to keep doing the work. We're going to keep partnering and supporting. And I think, showing up and reaffirming our commitment is one thing we can do. It gets really challenging, as you know, if you are too loud in this environment, then you have unwanted attention, right? And so it's a really big balance of how do you make people in our community and visitors in our community know that we're allies, know that I'm an ally, and that you're safe here, and that we want you here, and that we're going to continue the city services and programming and our dedication to inclusion without causing unwanted attention because we don't want to lose those resources that we want to offer folks.
And I think about the city's ability to host historical pages, the Black history pages on the city's website, LGBTQ history on the city's website. I think a lot of these things go hand in hand with creating that environment of supporting communities and ensuring that residents feel safe and seen, which is something that Fort Collins seems to do pretty well at, including
Yeah.
proclamations and other things like that. The crosswalk comes to mind as well. So.
Well, I hope so. And also the Pride Festival this year, which was the largest Pride Festival we've ever heard. The city played a big partner organization in hosting that at the library. And it was a great turnout, and folks from all over the region came. I hope that's showing, and council having listening sessions there. I had a listening session there, and the folks who just they didn't want to come up and spend their time at Pride talking about city issues, but just coming up and saying like, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, no one would have been here. And just the importance that just being there brings to people.
What does Fort Collins mean to you in general?
In what way?
In general, what is Fort Collins to you? What do you see as a community?
Well, Fort Collins is my home, as someone who was born and raised here. Fort Collins is my community. It's where, I left to go to graduate school in Portland, Oregon, and I came back for a reason because this is my home and this is my community. And I love Fort Collins, and I love not only just like it's a well-run city, it's a beautiful city. We have amazing natural areas and parks, and we have all these great amenities. But what brought me back was the people. I love the people of Fort Collins, and no matter how much we've changed or grown over the years, it's just amazing people in the community that Fort Collins built is like no other that I've lived in before. And so it's brought me back, and it's always felt like home. It continues to feel like home. And I think that that's what Fort Collins means to me is the people, the feeling when you're here. I love that you still go downtown, or you go to the grocery store and you're gonna see somebody you know. That doesn't happen everywhere, and so even in cities the same size as ours. And so just very lucky that we've been very conscious about how do you cultivate that community.
And I think that's very much true, as you can walk into sort of any coffee shop and bump into two or three different mayoral candidates. Are the With this being our first ranked choice voting election, how do you plan to appeal to voters, and in particular those that may not choose you as their first choice, but might want to rank you somewhere in the list?
Yeah, I think for anyone who knows me, I like always run on authenticity. I'm like, in my opinion, one of the worst politicians, and that's comes in good and bad. But I have throughout my 6 years on council shown up with bringing my values and bringing what I promise to the people of Fort Collins. Now, we may not always agree on issue to issue, but I think that people know why I voted for things, and pragmatic to a fault. Um, and so when I think ranked choice voting is such a great opportunity for Fort Collins. One, it gets more people involved in running for office. I mean, we have 7 mayoral candidates, and more people who run for office. It's great. It's like you have more choice, but then also more people are out there talking to community members, getting more people interested. Democracy, especially local elections, local has the most impact on your day-to-day lives. And so it is very important to vote in union elections. And if we can bring that rate up of who's voting, that's a win for Fort Collins. And so I'm very excited about who Fort Collins chooses. As the first time we've had ranked choice voting, how do you kind of do that? I think we look at New York City, and that's a whole different thing of cross endorsing and all these different tactics. And I think in Fort Collins, we're very good at being just really cordial. If you've been to any of the forums, all of the candidates, most of us are friends. We respect each other. We build off each other. We reference what each other said and things that we brought up. Fort Collins is very lucky to have 7 candidates who act in that manner. And so whoever Fort Collins chooses is going to be the right choice.
I think it's particularly telling to me that even prior to ranked choice voting, we had the District 4 election with 5 fantastic candidates who are each of them more gracious than the last, talking about each other. And only one of them was like, "Well, I'm really here to win, but I also appreciate all of the people." And that was as rancorous as it got. Seconded on the idea that there are so many wonderful people who are willing to put their name into the hat and step forward. Are there any voter groups or views that you are intentionally saying that's just not my game? I don't want to be associated with that.
No, I mean, if people want to vote for me or organizations want to support me, the thing is I feel like I have been very clear on my message since 2019. And so if people support that, and my message has been on housing, equity, transportation, and climate, and this feeling that we can do things here in Fort Collins. We can be thoughtful and pragmatic and approach things with expertise and learning, right? That's a huge thing is like you may go in knowing one thing and then you may come out with a different idea. And that's beautiful. And that's what government should do. And so I feel like people who have watched me over these 6 years know what I'm about. That's what I bring to mayor. And so I never say no to people.
What would voters be surprised to learn about you?
Surprised. I am like a very open book, but
If
surprised to
that's
learn.
if that's
Yeah.
nothing right off the top of your head, what was your weirdest job is the alternate question.
Okay, well, let's see. Surprised to learn about me is that in addition to being on city council, working a full-time job, I also run ultra marathons. So my third job is running. And that is just something that brings me immense joy. I just completed a 100 kilometers, which was 66 miles, which is great. And so it helps, running helps. My weirdest job, is that the other question?
Your weirdest job, or what would voters be surprised to learn about you? The ultra marathon thing is interesting. See, now I thought I was doing pretty good with the 10 miles a day while I was doing the campaign last time. It was 100 kilometers. Goodness sakes, that's a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an experience and it's for me it's similar to a lot of things in life, right? It's uh consistency, it's showing up every day, it's putting the work in, it's a bunch of learning over time, and it's being really committed, right? Once I really commit to something, I am committed and sometimes that's running for 18 hours straight.
So I'm gonna guess that you might say running, but if you could have any superpower to help your community, what would it be?
If I could have a superpower to help my community, I think at this time, it's just the superpower of listening and having empathy. I think right now it's people are having a really difficult time, which is fair and understandable. And how does Fort Collins cultivate a culture of that? We show up and we listen and we may disagree, but we're going to be respectful and we're going to try and learn from each other and understand where somebody's coming from. Um, because that's how it used to be, right? And so I think that's if I could cultivate something in Fort Collins, and I think Fort Collins generally does a good job in this space. We've had some issues where we're not doing a good job, but I think it's that we're really listening to each other and we're showing up with and assuming best intentions because we want to have a safe community, we want to have a respectful community, and we want to feel like we can trust each other.
Who do you consider a role model in public service, and what have you learned from them?
Oh, well, Kristen Stevens, who's now our county commissioner, has always been a great role model. I met Kristen when I was doing community organizing in mobile home parks before I was on city council, and just such a great advocate. She showed up to everything. She really wanted to work with mobile home park communities and listened and really took those concerns to heart and worked on things. This was when she was on city council at the time. And then when I decided to run, she was very encouraging. But then when I was elected, there you go into office and there is no guidebook. There's no how to, there's no onboarding of how to do this job. And it's really important to have mentors about how to navigate this, how to show up. And for me, Kristen just represents like a compassionate, thoughtful, and kind human. And that's what I want to be, and that regardless of what decision you're making, I want to walk away feeling like I was compassionate and kind and thoughtful. And it can be difficult at all times, but and so Kristen Stevens has been a great role model and thought partner. And how do you continually bring that to the dais?
Something that's I found curious is that there isn't like there's an onboarding maybe right as a retreat that you all do as a council, but there's not necessarily like oh, here's the best practices and what to do if and dot dot dot. And so even as a candidate, I was surprised at the utter lack of information that you get as somebody who is like average Joe running for a thing,
Yeah.
a neighbor who steps up and says, I want to participate. even my experience on the boards and commissions was more structured than either what I've heard from city council candidates or running for office in various issues. So I think that there's a need there for passing the torch before it's been passed, and really building up that bench of expertise. And I
Yeah.
see that a lot in Fort Collins in terms of like city staff.
Yep.
And Mike, who's director of parks, just retired, and had spent years building a bench
Mhm.
of folks who could come alongside him and do the work and knew it as well as he did, and maybe not exactly the same style or perseverance in every single case, but certainly the same level of passion. And I think that that's really telling us as where we are as a city. But I would love to see that happen from the governance side. Without getting too siloed into individual party politics, even though it is a nonpartisan position.
Yeah, well, I mean, it used to be. So in 2019, when I was elected, day one is the first time you're up on the dais and you are in Robert's Rules of Order and you are taking votes and you are making motions. And there is nothing, you get elected and then you're sworn in and that's the first thing, right? And you're voting for mayor pro tem. It's very contentious, right? Now we've gotten a little bit better where there's the election and you're not sworn in until January. So you have some time. And then there is a training where you get to go sit in the chair and go through the meeting. Very helpful. And it is very like you are just thrown in and business as usual is continuing at the city and you got to jump right in. And I think it takes 2 years to fully understand what's going on at the city.
And
And
that's a full term for a mayor.
it is.
That's that's
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Along with that, is there a piece of advice that you have received but you didn't follow and now you wish you had?
Piece of advice that I wish I followed. You asked me this last time and I couldn't think of one. Do you have an alternative question?
Not really. How about you could say what's the best piece of advice that you've received?
The best piece of advice I've received is no, you can't please everyone and you don't want to be weak tea, right? I don't want to be a cup of weak tea. I want to show up and I think, the also just being yourself and being authentic. It's really hard to do in politics. And that's what I've tried it. City council is a group of community members that are elected, and we are neighbors, and some of us work full time, and some of us are retired, and we're just here to serve our city. And so, being authentic and showing up, and knowing that you're not going to be for everyone, and that's okay.
What do you think Fort Collins will look like 20 years from now?
Well, I can say what I hope Fort Collins looks like. I hope Fort Collins is a place where people feel like it's a place of opportunity. And specifically talking just about some of the issues we've talked about with housing and employment. And folks really are struggling and feeling like there's not a lot of opportunity, that they are really stuck. And so I hope that we work and Fort Collins becomes a place of opportunity where people who are here feel like they can take risks and achieve their dreams, and people who want to move here feel like it's a place where you can go and you can make what you want happen. I think that would just be an amazing thing. And so I hope that for Fort Collins, because I think it builds a beautiful community where people have the time and the space to not only fulfill their dreams, but then give back to their community. When people are so stressed about paying bills or how they're going to make money, they're not here, they don't have the time or the capacity to give back to their city. But when people feel like their needs are being met and they have the capacity, that's when people can give back. And so the more and more we can make it for people to feel less stressed and more like they're meeting what they need and have that opportunity, then we're going to get people giving back to our community, and that's a beautiful thing.
Well, Emily, we've reached the point of the interview where it's time for rapid fire questions.
Great.
I'm going to ask a series of questions, and whatever comes to the top of your head is fine.
Great.
What is your favorite coffee shop?
I don't have favorites.
Well, that's going to make the rest of these questions real difficult.
It depends on my mood, but okay, to play along, I'll say currently Little Bird.
Okay. What's funny is Little Bird is one of it used to be a particularly great restaurant as well. But the carpentry in there is also done by the owner I believe the owner's husband, who also did the carpentry over at Explorado.
Oh, I love
So
that.
you see some of these works of art in places that are really fascinating,
Hmm.
that have a hidden backstory that you wouldn't necessarily know. So,
Yeah,
favorite brewery,
stodgy.
favorite park.
I'm going to say Overland because that's the one by my house.
Overland is actually it's such a beautiful park.
Hmm.
And the skate park that exists on the other side, with Spring Canyon and all the rest of those is
Hmm.
so cool.
Hmm.
Um, a Horsetooth hike or Pooter Trail bike ride?
Horsetooth hike, run, actually.
Several runs across
Yeah.
Horsetooth. Is that a thing? Do you, when you're ultra marathon training, do you run through Horsetooth multiple times?
And Lori.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, not for me, but I appreciate that for you. Favorite book?
I don't have a favorite. This is hard. I really actually don't have a favorite book.
Last book you read then. How about that?
This is too embarrassing. I can't admit this. 'Cause I am really in a youth fantasy genre right now.
You know what? That is just fine. Dating and Dragons was the one that I had pulled up. That was kind of
Oh,
interesting.
there you go.
Anxious Generation right now is what's
Yes,
on my
100%. Yes.
so that
When
was
you're
recommended.
campaigning, you need I need really mindless dumb books. So it's too embarrassing.
There's to a point where I mean, you can see behind me, these are all D&D reference and RPG reference books
Uh-huh.
behind me. So it's the level of, and actually how to become a better game
Yes,
master for your
exactly.
D&D games. So you know where my mind is at. That's fine.
Mhm.
If someone were trying to get a hold of you, do you prefer phone call, email, or text?
Text.
Uh, Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
And your favorite nonprofit in town?
Oh, the Family Center La Familia.
Tell us about what they do.
Family Center La Familia is a family resource center. So not only do they have a child care, but they work with mobile home parks and do social work.
One word to describe Fort Collins.
Wonderful.
One thing you could change about Fort Collins if you could just snap your fingers and change it.
Affordable housing.
Uh, that's a big thing, but yes,
You said one
absolutely,
thing.
it's the thing.
It's that thing.
And if you weren't running for office, what would you be doing this year?
Running a 100-mile race.
So, is there anything else that you would like a listener to know about you, your campaign, your positions, anything else that we might have missed?
Um, no, I just hope Fort Collins turns out and votes and shows up and you have great candidates to choose from. And I'm excited to see what happens.
Where can we learn more about you and your campaign, Emily?
Yeah, you can learn more at my website, which is Emily4FC, and that's FOR, not the number 4.com. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me here on Dear Fort Collins. I hope you had fun.
I had a great time, Nick. Thank you.
As we learn and listen from the candidates, there's so many different perspectives on different things, and hopefully, as a community, we're all learning who we align with and how we can, vote in RCV, because it's not going to be as complicated as we think, but it'll be a lot of fun, I think, to find and identify those folks and those leaders who we can really get behind, even if it's not the number one choice, maybe the second or third or fourth or whatever it is, that you're making more informed choices as a voter, and we hope that this has been a helpful series. So,
Yeah.
Emily, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Nick. It was great.